Our scripture is coming from Revelation 12 and 11. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimonies. Amen.
I remember the dad was like, stop, that's enough, stop. And he tries to like pull me off. My dad, with one punch, knocks him out. The guy's out cold. The kid's like crying and I'm punching him. And I get off, right? And my dad's like, break his arm. And I'm crying, I'm like, no, I don't want to. And everybody's like, no, like you're crazy, like what are you doing? And my dad said, I told you, break his arm. He's like, you're gonna be a man. And I told him I don't want to. So I remember he said, oh yeah? So he grabbed from my neck and the bottom of my shirt, he picked me up and dragged me. We lived in a second story apartment, and he hung me over the balcony. And he said, either you break his arm or I let you go right now. And whatever happens, happens. He's like, I don't care if you die. I don't care if you live. But he disrespected my home and you're disrespecting me by not listening to me. And I remember saying like, I don't want to die. And I was like, okay. Like, okay. And then he taught me, like I went in, he was like, okay. He's like, stop, be a man. Like, do this. And I remember he told me what to do, and the kid was just like on the floor like crying, and I took his arm and I broke it. My name is John Martinez. I am a father of 3 amazing boys. Love them to death. Isaiah, the oldest, Caleb, and then Nathan, our newborn. Well, he's a big boy. He's like 6 months. Married for 6 years and been walking with the Lord firmly for about 6 years as well. I am originally from Fairfax, Virginia, born of Hispanic parents. My parents are both El Salvadorian. They came to the United States about 27 years, 28 years now. They came when my mom was pregnant with my brother. On the way here, they stayed in Mexico for a little bit, and that's where I came into the picture a year after my mom gave birth for my brother. We would move around a lot when I was young. I remember my sister was born in Maryland, and then we moved back to Virginia, and then back to Maryland, and then back to Virginia, and then back to Maryland, and eventually we went up to Canada. Stayed in Canada for about, I want to say 4 years, around there. And within Canada, we were moving around to different provinces there as well, from Quebec to Montreal to Ontario to Toronto. And that was pretty much my life, always on the go. Never really had a place to call home. While I was still growing up, I remember enjoying time, but my dad wasn't really there. I never really understood it. I would always hear my parents always bicker, but I was too young to even say anything. Till I was like about 4 or 5. I remember seeing my parents fight in their room. They were fighting in the room, sorry, and I remember I just started crying and just started weeping. And then from there, like, I just stormed into their room and I saw my dad. I didn't know he was drunk at the time, but he was drunk, and he was pinning my mom up to the wall, and her face was blue and everything. And all I remember was just going to like save my mom. And I had to, like, what a little 4-year-old could do. I started punching and I started kicking and yelling. Eventually, my mom collapsed on the floor. She was unconscious, and all I remember is my dad turning around, cussing at me. I see his hand swing back. I'm out. I woke up in the emergency room, and the nurse was asking me, this is while we were still living in Canada, the nurse asked me like, hey, and I remember it vividly. She kept calling me like baby. She's like, hey baby, like, are you okay? Do you remember what happened? And all I remember was no, because it was so traumatic that all I saw was, all I could remember is entering into the room and lights went out and I woke up in the hospital. Social services came because when a kid gets hurt really bad, I was bleeding from my nose and everything like that. They called 911. I was unconscious. My mom was nowhere to be seen and my dad was there with me. So he said, no, nothing happened. They called Child Protective Services. They called it something different in Canada, but then from there, I remember they came to our house for a little bit, and I didn't see my mom for a couple of days. I do remember that vividly. She was gone. I didn't know where she was, but I was with my dad, my brother, my sister, and I was just trying to reminisce everything that happened. My dad was just kind of a charming guy. He was very, very eloquent with his words, and all I remember saying when the Child Protective Services lady came and she's like, is there mom? My dad said no, and I was like, wait, what? My mom's been missing for 3 days. I like, have you seen her? And I remember I was put in my room, and the lady kind of left, and here's where I say everything turned for me. My whole world, everything I knew about a loving family, and mom and dad always being there for me, everything turned where my dad barged into the room, and all I remember is him saying, "You'll never speak to an adult unless I tell you again." And all I remember is him taking off his belt, and he just unleashed, to the point where I couldn't feel the whips anymore. And I was screaming and yelling, and the more I screamed, the more he hit me. And I remember that I didn't go to school for 2 days because I could barely get up out of my bed. And it shook me up, because up until this point, all I known is like a loving family and nurturing family. My dad always being there, and my parents kind of going back and forth, but not really processing that they were fighting, or that evidence, that experience of seeing my mom getting choked out. And I remember my mom eventually came back. My uncle came into town from LA, and I remember seeing my uncle when we lived in Maryland, and I loved him a lot. I say loved because he passed away now, but I loved him a lot. I hugged him and everything. And I remember he just we were going to do like a cookout, and my dad wanted to show, or I guess portray, that we were still a loving family. And we were crossing a street to go to like a grocery store, and he wanted me to hold his hand, but I was so shooken up of what happened, I think this was like a month after or something like that. I didn't want to hold his hand. I wanted to hold my uncle's hand. So I remember saying like, no, I don't want to. And he grabbed his key and he put it in between his knuckles and he jammed it into my head. So that's actually this scar right here on my forehead. And then I woke up again in the emergency room. And then, crazy enough, the same nurse was like, "Oh, my baby, like, what happened? And from there, my dad again was with me, and he was like, he fell. He has 2 other siblings. He fell on the corner of the bed and split his head open. So obviously it was much bigger, like the scar on my head, but as I grew, it shrunk down. Fast forward, my dad got in trouble with the law in Canada. My mom sought an opportunity to run away and come to Maryland. I don't know exactly how my dad came back into the picture, honestly, but he found us in Maryland. He, got clean and everything like that. Well, apparently, what my mom tells me, like, he got clean. It's just that he would drink here and there. That's exactly what she said. But he's still your dad. We still have to love him. When I first saw him, I didn't want to hug him. and he got upset that I didn't want to hug him. And I didn't understand why I couldn't run to him like my sister did. I didn't understand why, I couldn't say hi to him, or even acknowledge that he's there. But, I went to him because my mom forced me, so I just kind of gave him like a little lean in, and he hugged me. But I still wanted to stay with my aunt. So during school, I would stay with my aunt like Monday through Friday and to go to school. And then on the weekends, I would go to my parents. But I remember on the weekends, he just had, I thought they were sodas, honestly. He had like stacks of cans of now what I know is beer. And he would get so drunk that we had to like open them for him. I remember he would black out to the, like, out. My mom would always go to church. So we were, I don't want to say we were raised in church. We raised knowing God. But as far as church goes, I feel like we went just to go, just to escape my dad's drunkenness and, find something more productive to do. But my mom would leave, and there would always be a huge argument. I remember that my dad wanted to keep my brother and I home. Always. He didn't care if my sister stayed, but he wanted the two boys to stay home. I remember that was always a thing. He would pass out so bad that, he would throw up and everything, and my brother and I had to clean him up. We had to shower him, we had to carry him, however we could. We would put a blanket on the floor, and we would just kind of like drag him and just splash him with water. He started bringing friends over, started drinking. And I remember in one of those moments that he brought his friends over. They had just started drinking. And I think my brother and I were fighting over like a toy or something, or like a TV remote. And we started fighting. We started like, little kid wrestling. My dad broke us up by whipping the both of us. We were crying. And I remember vividly the friend was like, just let them fight. Just let them fight. And my dad looked at us and he's like, you guys want to fight? You guys want to be men? Fight. And I remember he forced us to fight because he said, either you guys fight or I'm gonna whip you guys again. And I remember we did not want to fight. We were like, no, like we started getting scared. And he hit us so bad that I remember seeing my brother's back. And if you've watched the Passion of Christ movie, there's a vivid scene where Jesus gets whooped on his back and you see like the back just split wide open. I remember he wouldn't hit it from the leather part. He turned and hit the buckle part, and he hit my brother and it split his back open just like that. And he's like, I said fight, and I'm not even tired yet. So I remember I hugged my brother, and then he slammed me on the ground, and I was like, I'm trying to hug you for, like, I'm sorry for what happened, and trying to cover him, my older brother, trying to cover him from not getting hurt. And we started fighting.
And how old were you guys at that?
We were probably like, he's a year older than me, so we were like 6, 7, more or less. I can't tell you how long we fought for, but I just remember tossing, and my dad yelling, like, punch him, knee him, kick him, scratch him, do this, do that, and them just laughing. And I remember, there was blood on the floor. There was like, not like little drops, but there was like a puddle of blood on the floor. And my brother's back was still bleeding. And I grab like a towel or something, and like I'm trying to like clean it off because I didn't know any better. And my dad was like, stop being a sissy, come, like in the most vulgar way, like stop being a sissy, come. And I remember him grabbing either my dad loved Corona beers or he loved tequila. And I remember in that instance, I know it's tequila now because it was a big clear bottle, and he poured like half of the bottle on my brother's back, and he yelled, and then whooped my brother again for making him waste the tequila on his back. My mom got home. We went to the emergency room, and we said we fell in the forest. And when we got home, all I remember is my dad laughing, but it was a laugh that like haunted me. It was so empty and so like evil that he was like, kind of like, haha, like you guys fought and I enjoyed it. Like this, you guys made me proud. That's literally what we said. Like, you guys made me proud. Never ever have I heard "and I love you" from him up until this point. "And I love you" from him. I made you proud, or anything like that. Not even as much as like a hug or like a kiss. I've always received that from my mom.
What did she say when she saw you guys in that state?
She would just cry. She would just cry. And when she tried to go against my dad would hit her. I remember telling my brother, his name is Jose, I was like, Jose, like, what do we do? You know, I'm scared. And I remember him hugging me and him just saying, don't worry, I got you. Like, just that, like, in the most, like, innocent way. Like, I won't let anything bad happen to you. And since then, like, we've always had each other's backs till whenever we did something, or sometimes we wouldn't even do anything. My dad would just get mad. He would go into this rage. He would punch holes in walls when he was drunk, and he would call us out, and he would just be like, pull down your pants. And he would just whoop us just for his satisfaction, just from his rage, you know. I remember he had brought a whole bunch of friends over after like working, and we had just came from church from a Bible study on Bible service, on a Sunday. And you know, I came in all nice and everything like that, and he got my brother and I, like, got us by our shirts, dragged us in, pushed my mom with my sister, and said, stay out. Closed the door, locked it, put the key lock on it, the little chain, and you know, she couldn't get in. I don't know what happened, you know, if she tried or anything like that. And all I remember seeing is like a whole bunch of like 30, 40-year-old men, drunk, dude. Like our couch was like torn. It smelled like pee. It smelled like alcohol. It smelled like beer. And there's this one guy that was there when my brother and I first fought. He was like, hey, he called my dad's name. He was like, hey, let me see your boys fight again. And then I was like, no, like, I'm not gonna fight again. I don't want to do that. And then my brother started crying. And then I remember my dad slapped the both of us like hard. And my dad, he worked in construction, so you can imagine how thick his hands were, and he slapped us. And then he's like, you know, his big thing was stop being a sissy. And he tore off our shirts. Like, he ripped it, like tie and everything. Like, he just tore it all off. And, you know, he tore off our shirt, so we were like shirtless. And he was like, fight. We're like, no, we don't want to fight. So he took out his belt. He's like, oh yeah, you don't want to fight? And we're like, no, we don't want to fight. We don't want to fight. So he hit us. And his friend was like, oh, your kids are sissies. Like, they can't take a punch. They can't take a hit. Look at them crying. And I remember my dad punched both of us in our chest so hard, me in my chest so hard, that I lost my breath. I was like, that's the first time like he had closed fist hit us, and I was like, oh my god. And then I remember I flew back, that I heard a shatter, and I looked back and my butt had went through the TV, and I was like stuck in there. And then, you know, everybody was like, ooh, like all the crowd, and he's like, I said fight. And then my brother was like, I'm just gonna punch you once. I'm just gonna punch you once. And I was like, no, like, I don't want to get hit at all, you know, crying and everything. Like, no, I don't want to. And then everybody was like, oh, you know, his boys are sissies, you know, they won't do anything. So my dad at this point starts whipping the floor. He's like, I said, fight. And my brother punches me. And that did something to me. My tears just stopped. It just stopped. And we started legit fighting. And we were tussling and everything like that. And, you know, everybody was yelling, like, yeah, like, hit him, do this, do that, do this, do that. And I remember I hear, like, another glass be broken. We both stopped, right? And then I hear, like, a rolling. And it was a Corona bottle. And he's like, hit him with that. And I was like, no, like, I'm not gonna hit him. And, I'm cleaning my face. And I was like, no, like, you hit him. And I told him, I was like, if you want to be a man, you hit him. And, my dad, that's one of the only times my dad was like, no. He's like, if you think you're a man, bring your son to fight my kid, and then we'll use that. And, the whole thing stopped, But everybody stayed there. My brother and I were kind of like, take care of each other. We would clean up our blood and, do any scratches. My mom had taught us at this point, how to like hold pressure on a wound and clean it up. And I remembered my dad using alcohol, like drinking alcohol, but we used rubbing alcohol and hydrogen peroxide to like clean each other up. And I remember like a few hours later, we were in the bathroom. We were just like crying, like what happened? And I told my brother, I was like, why'd you hit me? Like, why'd you do that? And he's like, because I don't know what would have happened if I didn't. So we hear banging on the door, and I'm crying. I was like, I just want my mom. I hear banging on the door. And, we didn't open the door because we had locked it. And my dad kicks in the door. The door comes flying off. And, we're like, let's say a sink is here. I'm facing it. My brother's like to the side. So it like misses us. But the knob like scratches my whole back. So I'm like, in pain. I'm already in pain, but I felt that and it like stung. So I'm like, and then my dad said, come out. He came out, and my brother and I are like 7 and 8. I'm 7, he's 8. And this kid, he was like, had to be like 13, 14. And the guy was like, my dad's name is Jose Antonio, but they would call him Don Jose. Don Jose, you said your kids, that you said that your kids can take on mine. He's like, all right, I won't hit your kids. And then he rolled that same Corona bottle. He's like, but they can't take him. And it was this like, he was so tall, like to a 7, 8-year-old, he was so tall. And again, my dad was like, fight him. He's in my house. And, he started cussing him out. He's like, oh, you're going to be in my house disrespecting me, this and that. My kids are going to whoop your kid. Obviously there was a lot of cuss words in between. And he was like, he turned to us and he was like, fight him. He's like, and I want you to make him bleed. I want you to make him suffer. And I want you to rip every bone in his body. And we were like, no, like, we don't want to do that. So this kid hits my brother like on his shoulder with the bottle. It didn't break, but it was enough to like put him to the floor and start crying. And I remember he kicked my brother, and instantly like I got mad, like, don't hit my brother. So we started fighting, and people just started throwing things in, like a stick, a shoe, a belt, this, that, like just anything that they can find. And obviously it's a kitchen. My mom loved wooden spoons, so she would hit that, and we were just hitting each other. And it was like an all-out brawl, I don't know who won, but they stopped it. We were all pretty bloody. There's blood on the floor. And, my mom, I don't know how, she came into the house, stopped it all, and she laid on top of us. And she just kept weeping and saying, like, stop, stop, stop. You can tell my dad was yelling, and I kept feeling a thud, and my mom was like, you're gonna break my back. And my dad was like stomping on her to get off because the fight hadn't been over, apparently. But she's like, no, it's done. And this other guy came in whom I'd never seen before, and he was like, stop or I'm calling the cops. And everything stopped. We didn't go to the emergency room that time, but bottles were broken. We were pretty beat up, and I remember the kid had a broken nose, but I don't know who broke it. I don't know if I did or my brother did or somebody throwing something did. But that is where it went from like bad to worse. So like on the weekends or whenever my dad had his friends over, they would bring their kids over, and it was basically like a cockfight. My kid can take on yours. And there was no age restriction. So like this was our lives for like years. It felt like longer. Like, we don't want to fight. We don't want to fight. We would try to go to church as long as we can. But it was always a mess when we came back home. And I was still this chunky kid, so everybody was like, I want the fat one. I want the fat one to fight my son. I want the fat one because he seems easy. And my brother was like skinny. He said the fat one moves slow. And we would fight. We would fight until somebody said stop. I remember there was this one fight that changed me completely, that I knew I wasn't the same after that fight. I remember that week I had been picked on for being chubby, and I remember this kid on the desk, he slaps my side fat and grabs it. And then he was like, and he started making all these names, and I just started crying. And I hit him like on his chest / neck, and he starts like he lost his full breath. And I remember like I snapped, like I saw red, and I just kept yelling and kept punching and kept hitting him and kicking him and doing everything. And when I came to, like, I got myself together, I was in the principal's office and my mom was crying. And all I remember her saying is like, he fought somebody, he punched a kid, and he hurt him pretty bad, that he's in the emergency room. And I remember in the car my dad was like, so you want to fight outside of school? Like, you want to fight in school? Like, that's what you want to do? He said, okay, that's fine. And I remember thinking like, I'm about to get beat again. When we got back home, these guys came in, and my dad had told me, he's like, I want you to fight somebody. And I was like, no, like, I don't want to fight. I don't want to do this. I really don't. And I remember crying, and then he hits me. He backhands me, and he's like, you fight when I tell you to fight. If I tell you to stop, you stop. I'm in control here. You're not in control. You're nothing. You'll never be nothing. And if I don't tell you what to do, you're just gonna be a little sissy. And I'm telling you right now, when we get home, you're gonna take off your shirt and you're gonna fight, and you're gonna stop when I tell you to stop. When I tell you to throw a knee, you're gonna throw a knee. When I tell you to do this, you're gonna do that. And I'm thinking like, Lord, please, I remember it's one of the few times I started praying to God. And I was like, Lord, please, send my mom home. Please, let me see the church van and let me run to my mom. And I was scared. I was so scared. And I remember panicking, and my dad's like, shut up. Stop. And he was drinking and driving. So that made me even more scared, because I know how he gets when he's drunk. And we got home, no church van. Mom was not in sight, and I'm crying. And I see men, I don't see a kid in sight. And then I try to lock myself in my room, but he broke through that. He just broke through the door, and I said, come. And he dragged me out by my arm. And I remember telling him, you're hurting my arm, you're hurting my arm. And then he slaps me, he says, shut up. Now you just gave the enemy an advantage as to where you're hurt. And I remember my dad was like, okay, he's ready. And I see this dude, tall, from my perspective, tall as a tree, and wide and everything like that. And I was probably 10, and I would have to, if I had to guess, he was probably 14, 15, somewhere around there. He already had some sort of facial fuzz. And we fought, and we were going at it for a long time, until they started throwing things in there. And my mom liked to make tamales, and she had a big wooden thing. And I remember my dad specifically told me, hit him with this. And he's like, and I want you to hit him on his knee. So, I did that because he grabbed a stick and he started whipping me with it, hard. And so I just wanted things to be done. And I remember he's on the floor crying, and my dad said, get on top of him and finish it. And I was like, no, I don't want to. So he picks me up and he punches me in my gut. So I'm out of breath. He throws me on top of him, and I said, hit him. And then everybody's like, no, stop, because the kid's in agony, like, because I think I broke his knee at that point, and because I hit him repeatedly on it. And he was like, I said, keep going, and I still had my shirt on, so like my shirt is like a bloody mess, the floor, always a pool of blood. And he was like, I said, keep going. And I was like, I don't want to. And he said, keep going. And then he started hitting me with his belt. He said, keep going. Sorry. I remember the dad was like, stop, that's enough, stop. And he tries to like pull me off. My dad, with one punch, knocks him out. The guy's out cold. The kid's like crying, and I'm punching him. And I get off, right? And my dad's like, break his arm. And I was like I've never, actually done that on purpose. And I'm crying. I'm like, no, I don't want to. And everybody's like, no, like, you're crazy. Like, what are you doing? And my dad said, I told you, break his arm. And, from the whips, I remember I had a cut right here from like, it was like one of those sticks that like you hear the whooshing sound. And I had a cut there, and he poured alcohol in there. Like, he opened my shirt and poured it in there. And he was like, I need you to he's like, you're going to be a man. And I told him I don't want to. So I remember he said, oh yeah? So he grabbed from my neck and the bottom of my shirt. He dragged me. He picked me up and dragged me. We lived in a second story apartment. And he hung me over the balcony. And he said, either you break his arm or I let you go right now. And whatever happens, happens. He's like, I don't care if you die. I don't care if you live. But he disrespected my home, and you're disrespecting me by not listening to me. And I remember saying, like, I don't want to die. And I was like, okay. Like, okay. And then he taught me, like, I went in, he was like, okay. He's like, stop, be a man. Like, do this. And I remember he told me what to do. And the kid was just, like, on the floor, like, crying. And I took his arm, and I broke it. And it was his cry of pain and seeing. So I broke it to the point where the bone pierced the skin, meaning it came out. It was right at the elbow, and it popped out. So like this, I don't know, I didn't know which bone at the time, but this bone right here popped right through the skin. And he was like, everybody get out. Like after that, he ordered everybody to get out. Didn't call 911. And I remember just looking at him and crying. But at this point, I didn't cry loud. It was just like tears coming down. And I just looked at him. And every time after a fight, my dad would always tell us to clean up the blood. But I didn't this time. Like I was just like, what happened? And my dad, like, took the kid out, and then the guy was like, you're going to pay for this, this and that. And my dad was like, shut up, get out of my house. And my dad started congratulating me. He's like, that's what I wanted you to do. That's what a man is. And I remember, like, feeling weird because, like, I know I did something wrong, but in a sense, it made him proud. So I was confused, and my mom came home, and I remember I started shaking because it started hitting me like I broke this kid's arm. Like I broke this kid's arm really bad. And, I'm like, oh my God, like I'm trembling. And my mom comes home, and she's like, what happened? Like, what happened? She's trying to clean me up, and my brother's like, what happened? And I was just trembling. I couldn't say anything. I was just there. My brother describes that moment as like, I was there but wasn't there. And it took me like 2 days to talk about it. Like even at school, like the teachers was like, are you okay? Like what's wrong? Like what's going on? Like you're normally like talkative, and you would say extra and this and that, but you're so quiet. I remember they took me to the counselors, And they were like, what's going on? And I didn't say anything. They called my mom, and my mom was like, I don't know. Like, he's just been quiet for the last couple of days. That moment made me cross that line where I lost my whole childhood. Like, I became this person that on demand, I can flick on a rage, and in that moment, I can take it off. My dad was like, whatever, like, you're no good to me. And then he would put my brother to fight, and he would still have these people come over to our houses and fight. And that was the thing. And people started placing bets, and and we would just, that was the thing. And we would clean up the blood. I remember when we got to like about 13, when I got to like about middle school, I want to say middle school, that's when I started having problems at school. Like, that's when it really started to show in school. I started fighting this guy, and he was like, in one fight he was like, I'm done. And I've never heard that, because usually it's like I stop till there's enough blood on the floor. That's when I stop, or till somebody tells me stop, or until I'm pulled off. He's like, I'm done. And I remember they pulled me into, because that fight was after school, and I remember they pulled me into the office. They sat me down. They had police there just in case if anything happened. And my dad was there. And my dad was like, what happened? And I was like, I don't know. And so basically, I didn't know that they were recording the fight of me and this guy. And it wound up in some teacher's like phone or something, and they kind of said like that I'm a problem from the school, and that I need to do this, that, and the third. And my dad, I just see him like fuming with rage that basically I just embarrassed him in front of everybody. And he took me out, and he took my brother out of school, and we drove home. And because she had told him, like, this is not only him, it's your other son as well. So my brother and I have two different last names, but everybody knew who we were at that point. So they took us both out, and I remember we got one of the worst beatings that I can ever remember. Like, it was really bad. Like, he didn't stop. We made holes in the walls because he threw us. And I remember him saying, like, you want to fight outside of school? And I don't know how, but he got boxing gloves. And he's like, put on your gloves. He said, you want to be a man, you're going to fight me. And, at that point, there had been so much rage that I was just quiet. And every time I would get upset, I just got super quiet. And I would just stare. Because in me, there was like this raging fire, because of a monster that my dad had created, that on demand, if he said fight, fight. And when he said go, attack, like, I would go and attack. And we didn't win, obviously, because it's my dad. But he knocked us out. And I remember missing school for like 4 days, because that was one of the only times he hit us in our faces. And I had a huge like knot on my head, a black eye, and my brother had he had busted his lip like down to like his chin. So we didn't go to school. We healed up. We went back, and everybody thought that we got jumped again. And my brother had these friends that were twins, and he was like, you like to fight? He was like, yeah. He's like, all right, these guys disrespected us. And my brother like jumps in with these guys, and he attacked a gang member without him knowing. So it started, my brother fighting them, and I started hearing about it. I kind of like settled back a little bit. I had friends who like would fight, and we would like hustle kids for money. But then they found out that my brother had a little brother, which was me. So they set out gang members to come and fight me in the school. Like, I guess like kids would transfer over, and we just started fighting. We just, every day every day, like on the way to school, we would fight this gang. And every day after school, we would fight this gang. There were days that I won, I guess if you want to call it winning. There was days that I lost. There was days that I went home barefoot because they had stole my shoes. And, it had gotten so bad that they figured out where we lived. And at this point, my dad had stopped asking us to fight because he saw that we were getting in trouble more and fighting more. That I guess he didn't want to like provoke a beast in his own home. And I remember we were all eating. This is now we're like freshman year. We're fighting with this gang, and me and the guy who I had won respect with, I didn't know he was in a gang too. So after fighting a couple of guys and them seeing me like fight, I guess I had gained their respect into anything I wanted, really. And we would go out and we would rob people at night, and we would fight, and we would steal from gas stations, and we would move marijuana. We would smoke marijuana. I always loved music, and in the music, like, because of my dad, I started listening to like rap, hip hop. It was okay. I remember liking it. I liked a good a good flow. My brother got into like a whole rock phase. I didn't like rock like that because it was too angry for me. Like I didn't want to like battle my demon with a demon. And then I heard a friend of mine have like play techno on his phone, and I was like, I like that a lot. Like, wow, like I really liked like the beats and the moves, and I would just feel a sense of like calm when I would hear that. And he was like, try this when you listen to it, and he gave me like a sticker, and I was like, well, what do you do with it? He's like, just put it under your tongue. It's like a candy, and it was LSD. And I remember like that was the beginning of like my LSD issue. And I started like triggering, like I started taking it and listening to techno and getting lost in the music. I remember like in one of those like LSD highs, was I started seeing demons, and it scared me. And it scared me because they would say like, you're gonna die. You're gonna die. And I remember vividly one instance that I took it. I was listening to techno, and my iPod, back then, my iPod video died. So I was just staring at a tree, and the tree was like, jump, your life is meaningless, jump. And I'm sweating, and and I'm looking at the jump, and the thing was like, jump and I'll catch you. And it was just repeating that, like, your life is meaningless. But it was so dark that I was scared. And I hadn't really been scared in a long time. So I didn't jump, thank God. I was still going to church. But I remember, like, the youth pastor at the time telling me, like, why are you so angry? And, I was mouthing off, so I was like, why shouldn't I be? Or who are you? Like, who do you think you are? And I remember when he said that, like, I said that pretty loud. And this one kid was like, no, like, don't disrespect him. It was his son. So I pushed him, and I was like, what are you going to do about it? Like, don't disrespect me. And they were like, hey, calm down. And at this point, my mom had been sharing what's been going on to the church and asking for prayer, because we were so lost in that gang life, my brother and I, that we had a problem with a pretty big gang. Mind you, like, Langley Park was here, so we had a lot of problems with like Spanish gangs and territorial gangs, and we were sought after. We had anonymous calls saying like, you're green lighted, meaning like you have a death sentence on you. And I remember I would laugh back and be like, bring it on. And I can tell you so many stories, but there's, it's just so much of fear and like back and forth battle. and I'm just one guy with like a whole gang that I didn't know. And until one night that I went, I went out because I had snuck out, and I saw them that they were having like a meeting, and they were like, "Oh, here you are." They would call me the Tasmanian Devil from like Looney Tunes, because in a moment like he just turned it on and like would battle out. So this is I snuck out, and earlier that morning I had that conversation with like the youth pastor. So I ended up walking out, and I waited for my mom outside because I didn't want to talk about why I was so angry, and I didn't understand it. I didn't know why, because it had been so much, like all my life was violence, so I didn't know where it came from. So I snuck out, and I'm questioning. I'm like, that just resounded me, like, why are you so angry? And I was like, dang, like, I don't know, like, why I'm so angry.
This is John Martinez, second take, salvation testimony. Let's just continue from where we left off, which was you were getting to your salvation. So I'll just let you continue.
Yeah, so where did we leave off? I snuck out of my house. It was like the middle of the night. I was gonna go meet up with my boys in the hood across the across the street in the park where we always do. This day was very particular because it didn't feel right. It didn't feel right. Out of all the times that I snuck out, all the times we would do things, it didn't feel right because of that one question, like, what's wrong with you? And it rattled me, and I was like, man, like, what is going on with me? Because up in this point, everything has been so destructive and everything was so violent. You know, at this point, you know, the problem with this said particular gang had gotten to the point where they broke in my house. We fought in our house. My mom got threatened. My dad got threatened. And it was just a lot of things that were piling on. I wanted to run away from who I had become. And I was, you know, that's in the music world, techno turned into EDM. So I started doing raves, and I started LSD was my thing. You know, I would drop acid whenever I could, and I would leave this dimension to go into another one in my mind. So it was just a lot of like loss, and that question just kind of like baffled me, where people were like, are you okay? Like, they had to call my name, what's going on, what we had to do, who we had to go rob this time. So we went, and they only send my friend and I and this driver. We go to this home in Langley Park, and they're like, you know, we're not gonna rob, we're gonna do something else. So we started to throw flashbangs in there. We were just told to throw it in. Next thing you know, we hear gunshots. So we start running. The driver drives off, and I'm telling my friend, let's go, run. I took off. And as I'm looking, like, when I'm turning to look, I had saw one of the gang members who were there, and he legit said, "What are you doing in my house?" And that's when I got scared, and I was like, that's one of the most realist times where I thought I might die. Because we had went right into the wolf's den, and we've started some stuff. Our driver has gone away, and it's me who people know very well because of our history, and this guy. So we run off. There's gunshots, and I keep looking back to make sure he's behind me. He's behind me. At one point, I stopped looking back, and I just ran off. When I turned around, he was nowhere to be found. I ran back, and he was crying for help because he had been shot.
This is the guy that saw you.
This is the guy that was with me. This is my friend. He had gotten shot, and he was on the floor crying, you know, for help, kind of sort of choking in his blood. I hid behind some bushes, and right as I was gonna go, police arrived on the scene, medics and everything like that. And I just hid away in the bushes, and saw his life go before his eyes. And they searched around, they didn't find me. We were wearing all black. And I remember for that moment, the thought again happened. What's wrong with me? Like, why am I in this? Like, why am I doing this? Like, what is this? We went back. Long story short, I went back home. I couldn't sleep. I was trying to numb the pain, dropping acid even more now. Instead of like just for music, I would do it just to numb a pain. And every time I took it after seeing my friend die, I heard voices saying, "You're gonna die. You're gonna die." Like the fear of death was so strong, and because of the life that I was living, my family would tell me, "You're not gonna live past 18. You're not gonna live past 21. You're gonna be just like your dad." So all this was trying to I was coming to the end of myself. Looking back, I was coming to the end of myself, and the Lord was just waiting for me to fully submit. So the next day, 2 days go by, and my homies come knocking on my door, asking me to come out, asking me what happened that night. And the I guess the leader, you could say, he was Muslim, and he would always say, like, if somebody got locked up or died or anything, he would say Allah knows why, he's in heaven now. So that kind of triggered me to find an escape, to get rid of everything. I contemplated in taking my life, but due to my Christian upbringing and hearing little things about the Bible, I was torn, because in church they say suicide is bad and where you would end up, but here's this guy saying that Allah is God, and if I commit suicide but I believe in this God, I would still go to heaven. So I would contemplate that every time. The voices got a lot stronger every time that I was on LSD, and voices to like take my life, or to jump at a tree, that a tree will catch me, or hearing the people that I hurt in the background. And I was just so done with all that pain and never really finding a way to express it.
And how old are you at this time?
Right here is sophomore year, so it's about 15, 16.
Wow.
And I remember, I'm still, the question is still there, and I'm just like questioning God, like, why'd you do this? Like, why did you allow any of this to happen to me? I was such a happy person. I don't understand how home just doesn't feel like home to me. It never has. That's one of the, if there was a little bit of prayer that I had, that was it. Why did you do this to me? Why didn't you come when I told you? So it started creating like a bitter heart towards everything, everybody. Anybody who mentioned God, I would just get upset. I didn't really want to hear it. I remember going to a church. There was it was kind of like a one-day event at the church with all the youth, and a couple other youth from different churches came. And I remember I was forced to go, and I didn't want to, because I had just coming off a high, so I didn't want to go like that. And two, I just was done with the church. But I remember my mom talked to the youth pastor, and the youth pastor saw me there just sitting the whole time at this day event, and he asked me, he's like, are you willing to praise God today? And I said no. And he's like, well, why do you say that? And I was like, because I'm not going to praise a God who has put me through so much hurt, so much pain. I don't believe that's a God that loves. And he's like, well, God loves you, he's there for you, he's this, he's that. And this is one of the most out of line things. And it brought him into the perspective, the youth pastor into perspective, that there's so much more going on that I don't know. because he pulled me to his office and he was like, you know, you need to learn how to submit to God and let him just penetrate your heart, because your rebellious spirit is going to take you to hell. And I told him, I was like, why would I believe in a God, you know, just going back and forth, and in my ignorance, I was like, why would I believe in a God whom I prayed for from the time that I was 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, begging him to not beat my mom, begging him not to beat me, not to send me to the emergency room, to come just like the Bible said he would. You know, why would a God allow that for me, where I know a God, and I was talking about Muslim, the religion of Islam. If I take my own life today, I'm guaranteed heaven. Here, I'm not guaranteed heaven. So you tell me, I was like, so you look at me in my eyes and see that 5-year-old boy and tell me that God loves you and God is going to come for you. I was like, you go ahead and tell that 5-year-old boy that his eye is swollen shut, his back is torn, his mom is knocked out. Go ahead and tell that boy that God is in control, that God's going to do everything. And he stayed quiet, and he didn't know what to say. And I was weeping, and I was telling all this in like angry crying. And I remember slamming the desk, and I was like, answer me. Like, I need you to answer me. I need you to tell me this. And he just lays his hand on me, and he's like, let me pray for you. And I remember, like, I wanted to rage so bad. But one thing he said, he's like, you know, I can't speak to that 5-year-old boy, and I won't try to. But the one thing I will tell you is that God can restore, God can heal. All that weight, all that pain that you have, God can take it. And I remember like me yelling at him. I was like, you know, he can't. And, you know, just being so used to violence and being so used to abuse just makes you feel like there's no way out. And I remember he hugged me so tight, and I'm punching him like, get off. And he told me, he's like, the Lord loves you and he sees you. I remember that in that moment, that hug that hug made me believe that if I never heard an I love you from my dad, that in that moment that he was willing to take all of that and hug me and still say, God loves you. I promise you he does. That the cross, that he died on the cross is for you too. I remember it you know, I'm trying to tell him to stop talking, and he just prayed. And we stood, bro, we didn't even go to that service. We just stayed in his office crying. And I remember he's telling me, he's like, you gotta learn how to let that stuff go. And then I told him, like, you know, how deep in trouble I was with this gang, and you know, like, I'm in a gang, so I can't just leave like that. And he just told me, he told me a story, because, you know, I didn't read the Bible. He told me a story of how there was a king that said that God loves him so much that he sets up a nice table and sits all his enemies and allows the king to eat comfortably, beautifully, without anybody to disturb him, and his enemies have to watch him feast like there's no tomorrow. And he's like, God can do it for you. You know, I was still trying to fight. Even in that moment, I was like, God can't do this for me. You know, God can't. He can heal one thing, but he can't take me out of this. He can't take me out of everything that I've done. You know, like, it just didn't feel for me. I remember, like, you know, I didn't really talk to anybody for like a couple weeks, and then weeks turns into months. And I'm trying this whole God thing, you know, trying to go to church and this and that. And there's this musician that comes up to me, and he's like, hey, you know, like, I see that you like music, and, you know, what kind of music do you like? And I was honest with everybody. So I was like, you know, I like EDM music, I like party music. And he's like, but what do you think about like salsa and merengue and all this stuff? And he played the congas, and I was like, shoot, I mean, I guess I'll try it just to keep me off the streets. And he's like, yeah, because I had a dream that you were worshiping the Lord on the stage.
And I was like, okay, I guess that's fine. And I start going over this guy's house, and he's showing me patience and timing and rudiments and everything like that. And he's like, this is how your walk with the Lord should be. And I was like, man, come on, if you're gonna teach me, but if you're gonna talk to me about Jesus, forget about it. Like, I'm all right. And he's like, all right, man. He's like, don't worry about it. He's like, just keep coming, and eventually, what he was saying, how he was tying music into God and music into life and music into like joy and putting you into moods and things that it carries. I started listening more to worship, and just like, all right, let's see what people are talking about. I was like, let me allow the music to kind of touch me. And I told God, I was like, I'm gonna try you out. And I guess, in my ignorance, I gave him an ultimatum. I was like, either you protect me and shift my whole life around, or, I'll just go across the street to the next religion over. And, I'm praying, and it, bro, like night and day, I started like reading my Bible, and I just started like reading and starting to hear about this person that died on a tree and took all of our sins. And I remember just crying because every time, like, when the Lord was whooped, when Jesus was receiving his lashes, I heard Jesus saying, I was thinking your name the whole time. And I remember I cried so hard in my room. And, I was just like, man, like, Jesus, like, you love me. Like, without even knowing me, you love me. You love me. And I'm not really talking to, like, friends anymore. I'm not really hanging around the same circle groups. I'm more focused on this worship and trying to find the meaning behind it. I remember that was going well for a while, and I went over a family cookout, and I remember, like, I got upset over something, and then my aunt said, see, you're gonna wind up just like your dad, drunk, angry person, nobody likes you. And I remember that still hurt me so bad that I left. She lived in Rockville, and I left. And we lived in Silver Spring, so I walked all the way, and I popped acid one more time, and bro, it was the most horrible experience ever. Like, I legit saw demons, like, in my face and laughing at me and kind of making fun of me. Like, we have you so wrapped up that no matter what you do, you'll always be surrounded by us. And I remember, like, I'm yelling, I'm screaming, and I'm trying to fight. And in that moment, there was this, like, hurricane wind that came through my room, and I saw an angel, and an angel came down, and he said, stop. And when I tell you, those demons that I saw, like, bowed down, literally, like, got on one knee and stopped talking. And he said, he looked at me and he said, this is God's son now. Like, he belongs to God. And I remember just, like, in my room, laying, crying, not sure at this point if I'm still feeling these effects or if this is real. But it felt so real to have a moment of peace in that state. That moment happened. I prayed and I told God, like, have it all. Like, I'm done of trying to do everything. I'm done even contemplating being a Muslim, because I was still tiptoeing here and there because I wanted an out so bad. But I remember that moment just made me feel like I was out. Like, the doors were open and I can just walk right through. And I remember I told my friend who was the musician who was teaching me, I told him, I was like, yo, you have to come pick me up now. I was like, talk to me everything about Jesus. Show me everything. And we prayed for hours and hours. And I told him, the mess that I was in.
And he's like, you know what? The Lord will make it so that your enemies won't even see you, that they'll just walk right over you, and you will be home scotch free. And bro, that's exactly what happened. I remember like the I was going to the gas station that was near where we lived, and everybody who was there knew me. And the owner comes in. The owner, like, I'm talking to the owner. I'm like, hey, like, you know, I just want some chips and a soda. And I'm talking to my friend, and he's like, who are you? What's your name? And I was like, man, stop playing. Like, this is who I am. And he's like, no, like, I've never seen you before. And I was like, okay. So I walk by, and then my gang is getting jumped by, you know, another person. Like, they got, you know, it was just a huge fight. And I'm walking right into it. And as I'm going towards, like, in my mind, I'm still like, those are my boys. I need to go. And the police get there, and they arrest everybody. And they just tell me, they just shove me, and they're like, go home. And the police know me at this point. Like, they know who I am. And it's like if I didn't exist, if I was like a new person. And that's how it was for the next couple of days. Like, my life, I was sort of hidden. One of the things I prayed to the Lord, I was like, you got to get me out of this. You got to protect me. I don't want to see my family hurt. I don't want to see myself hurt anymore by this gang violence, by this drug. And it was just like a complete surrender, and he did that. There was word that they were looking for me, that the rival gang was looking for me specifically. And I remember being so scared, and I told the Lord, I was like, make them go away. And that morning, the following morning, immigration hit Langley Park, and the news report said that they arrested, like, you know, 3-digit numbers and gangs, and they showed the photos, and I remember seeing every last person who I had fought with had been deported in a way. And the Lord just really showed me, like, I'll protect you at all times. And I just felt so in awe, and I was like, wow, like, what kind of God is this, that I didn't want anything to do with him. I would get upset and tell him, this is your fault. You're you know, you're a mean God. You're not a real God. You know, you're just history that people keeps repeating, but you hold no power. When I tell you, since then, I believe in the Lord's protection, provision, and just all around love, because he did that for me. He made people go away in the way that I didn't know how. And all it took was my surrender. All it took was for him to come in my heart and take that all away. Remove me from that, literally night and day. Literally, like, from one night to the next. People didn't recognize me. And there was one guy that I knew from my childhood, and we were in it. He told me one time, he's like, you know, this isn't for you. This life isn't for you. He's like, church is for you. So go. He's like, don't worry about it. I know your family's safe. I would just say that you moved away. And that's it. And I've been walking firm with Jesus ever since, and never looked back. And even when the enemy tries to come around, the Lord just reminds me of his protection and how he freed me from that whole lifestyle.
What is your life now? Can you just give us an insight as to where you are now with Jesus, and what he's teaching you now, and what are the changes in your life now that you've seen that he's done in your life?
Yeah, one thing for me is he's made me more forgiving. When before I would be so angry, and if you did something wrong to me, I would automatically put you on like a hate list, and you know, I would start just raging as well when I would get like lose control. The Lord has really brought peace, tranquility, and one thing he's really teaching me now is, obviously I said earlier, like, I'm a father of 3, teaching me his love for somebody other than me and my wife, for something that
kind of like creation, how God loves creation. We don't really understand it. We can kind of grasp it, but for me personally, having a kid, I understand that is a creation of mine. Obviously, all glory be to God, but that's my creation, and learning how to love it, nurture it, in the good, the bad, the ugly. My love doesn't change.
For the people watching your testimony right now, what are some last words that you can say to whoever is watching this right now?
I would just say, just try it. Try Jesus. Try Jesus in the way that you've never had before. What I mean by that is, like, for me, I told him, I was like, I'm gonna try you, but you need to like do something for me first. I need you to take me out of this. And I tried him with what little faith I had, what little knowledge I had, and he did it all for me.
If you were blessed by today's broadcast and would like to give a donation and or love offering to support what we're doing here at New Life World Outreach Ministries, the place where love is, please feel free to do so at this time by sowing through our website, nlwoministries.com, or through the app Givelify. Thank you, and may God continue to bless and prosper you in His Word.
Givelify is giving simplified. Givelify is the simplest, most beautiful way to give and track donations to the place of worship or charity of your choice. You're not limited to the cash you have on hand. There's no need to write checks, and there are no complicated forms to fill out or text message codes to remember. Givelify automatically pinpoints your location and intelligently identifies the fundraiser, worship service, or conference you're attending without the need to search. Since Givelify automatically detects where you are, making a donation can be completed in as few as 3 taps. Tap 1. Use one of the pre-configured denominations to choose your donation amount. Tap 2. Select the campaign to which you'd like to contribute. Tap 3. With your stored credit or debit card, complete your donation in 1 tap and get an immediate donation receipt. Setting up recurring giving is a simple 2-tap process. Tap the frequency you'd like, and you'll never forget to make your gift. Givelify lets you easily see your complete donation history. Mark the place of worship you normally attend as your home for quick 1-tap access. Givelify. Tap, give, done.
Amen. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not to thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path.